My name is Stephen Schmidt. I'm a librarian at Greenwich Library. I have the pleasure of speaking today with novelist Emily St. John Mandel. Her latest book, The Glass Hotel, was released on March 24th. Due to our current situation, she's been unable to promote the book in the traditional manner, so we thought we'd check in to see how she's doing and chat about the book a bit. Emily, it's great to see you again, and thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. It's nice to, I don't know what the verb is. Nice to be here, but it's all right. Nice to see you digitally.
Thank you very much. So to start with, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about The Glass Hotel.
Yeah, sure. This is the US edition. So as you mentioned, it came out March 24th. Um, it's a very difficult book to try to describe, partly because it's the weirdest book I've ever written. So my previous novel, which I visited Greenwich for, was Station 11. That book was so easy. People would ask me what it was about, and I would say, well, it's about a traveling Shakespearean theater company in a post-apocalyptic North America. Like, done. It was so easy. The Glass Hotel is a very weird book. It centers around the collapse of a massive Ponzi scheme. Every character in this book is fictional, but the crime is based on Bernie Madoff's crime, which, of course, that scheme imploded in New York about 11 or 12 years ago. It's also a ghost story, and it's also about a woman disappearing from the deck of a container ship about 10 years after that Ponzi scheme collapses. So as you can tell, it kind of eludes the elevator pitch description, but yeah, that's the overview of it.
I have to agree with you because oftentimes people have asked me what the book is about, and it really is hard to describe. But I have to say, I really, really enjoyed it. And you did such a great job of connecting your characters over a period of time and through different locations. And you make it seem effortless, even though I know that it's not. It's really, really a great job. And I love how the book is full of surprises. Those surprises begin, to me anyways, almost immediately. The first thing you encounter as a reader is a cryptic set of passages numbered 1 through 8, sort of like an outline. Mm-hmm. But the significance of these passages don't come to light until you've been reading the book for a bit. Why did you choose to do this? It's sort of like you're providing some early clues.
Right. So I would describe this book as an ensemble piece. But the one character who I would say is at the heart of the book is this woman, Vincent, who, you meet her in this first chapter. And I feel like this isn't a spoiler because it's literally the first page and a half of the book. But she's falling off the side of a container ship in the first section of the book. And the reason why it's kind of fragmentary is I was thinking about a sort of fragmentary consciousness. You're falling off the side of a ship into the Atlantic. Things don't look great for you. I feel like that's not a coherent moment of thought, that it'll be flashes of image and memory and panic. So yeah, that was why I chose that structure. It seemed appropriate for the moment. And then it was also, because she was so important to the book, I kind of liked the idea of beginning and ending with Vincent. So yeah, it's partly to kind of center her in the story. Partly also, let's be honest here, there's something kind of manipulative on the part of novelists in the structure of a novel. You really want to open with a chapter that makes people want to keep reading. So I wanted it to be kind of a gripping scenario. You read it, it's like, oh God, she's falling off the side of a ship. Like, how's that going to end? Yeah, so for all those reasons, it seemed to make sense.
You mentioned the character of Vincent, and during the course of the book, we meet multiple characters and visit a lot of different places, but the thread to me that holds the book together is Vincent. She's had a tough upbringing and sort of does what she needs to do to get by. She's sort of like a chameleon. Mm-hmm. She goes from a down on her luck bartender to a trophy wife. Throughout the book, she seems to be searching for something. What is it she's searching for? And also, what do you mean by the phrase, the tragedy of Vincent?
She was a character who I can relate to in some ways, but not others. A way that I can't relate to her is that she's someone who's never known what to do with her life. I've personally always had some level of ambition, which I feel like is almost a dirty word in our culture, but to my way of thinking, being ambitious is in no way incompatible with being a kind person who helps other people. But yeah, I've always had something that I was really driven to do. I was a dancer before I was a writer, and now as a writer, I'm really driven to write novels. The tragedy of Vincent is that she's a very intelligent person with no ambition. And she's someone who's never really known what to do with her life, which, that's not necessarily a tragedy. You can still find happiness there, but it's something that she struggles with. So, yeah, that was what I meant by that. Just, I guess the tragedy of directionlessness is what she's dealing with.
Because, she does have a lot of, I don't know, possibilities. She's smart. She's not really driven, but she understands what she needs to do. So I think I know where you're coming from on that one. One of the main strands, which you mentioned earlier, of the story surrounds a wealthy money manager who shares a lot of the same traits as a real life white collar criminal. What motivated you to include a nod to real life or culture in this case?
You know what it was? I was fascinated by that crime when it broke. The scale of that crime was extraordinary. A 65 billion with a B dollar Ponzi scheme. But what really drew me into the story, and this relates to a different section of the book, was when that story broke, when Madoff was arrested. I was an administrative assistant at a cancer research lab at the Rockefeller University in New York. And I really liked all my coworkers. A wonderful thing about that kind of environment is everybody around you is really smart, which is such a pleasure and so refreshing after some of the jobs that I've had. So I really liked my coworkers. And as it became clear that Madoff hadn't acted alone, I can't remember how many people it was, but I want to say about 6 staffers were arrested in connection with the crime. Because a guy like Madoff, he's not going to format his own fake account statements. You need a staff for that. So all these people were getting arrested. And I just found myself thinking about the group dynamics in that office. You think about any group of coworkers, your colleagues at the library, any other group that you're close with. You think of the kind of camaraderie that you have, that sense of shared mission. Imagine how much more intense that is if you're showing up at work every weekday morning to perpetuate a massive crime. I mean, it's just kind of mind-blowing to me. So that was my entry point into the story. And this novel, it took a lot of revisions to pull it together. So things got reshuffled a lot. But the first chapter of the book that I ever wrote was what eventually became chapter 10 in the book. And it's told in the plural. We had crossed a line, from the perspective of those Ponzi staffers. So that was my entry point into the book, was my fascination with people who had carried out this crime. One thing I do like to emphasize, though, is that everybody in this book is fictional. So it's not actually a story about Madoff, who's frankly not a particularly interesting person. You read his prison interviews. He's kind of a garden variety narcissistic sociopath. You don't sense a lot of depth there. Yeah, and it's not about his actual staffers or his actual investors his actual colleagues. But the crime in the book is the same.
And I didn't mean to mislead anybody by saying that it was. I just was curious about your motivation. But to talk about, his name in the book is Jonathan Alcides. Am I pronouncing that right? Mm-hmm. It seems to me that he really genuinely liked some of the investors. And it almost seemed like besides Vincent, they were his only friends. But he didn't really seem to be, there's some excellent scenes of him in prison. And it doesn't seem like he has much remorse.
Yeah, it's true. It's a really interesting phenomenon, not just with criminals, but just with people in general. My experience has been that nobody ever thinks they're a bad person. We all have these sort of stories we tell ourselves, these narratives about how, maybe we did a bad thing, but that doesn't mean there's anything fundamentally wrong with us. If only the world had treated us better, or if only this had been different. We just have a real reluctance to take ownership or responsibility for unfortunate acts, I guess. So, yeah, I was thinking of him in those terms, that he's a guy who knows intellectually that he's committed a massive crime. But if only those impossibly demanding investors hadn't pushed him, how different everything might have turned out. I think that as a species, we have a real gift for victimization. It's always somebody else's fault.
It's interesting how quickly he seems to fall into prison life too. It's just he's just one of the guys. Very interesting. So to get back to Vincent, her relationship with Jonathan jolts her into a level of material wealth and comfort that she's not used to. So it's a new concept to her. I love how she refers to it as the kingdom of money. She talks a lot about how different things are in the kingdom of money. She was uncomfortable there, but really enjoyed the idea of not having to worry about money. In one way, she seemed happy, but as time went on, she clearly wasn't.
Yeah. When we first meet her, she's a bartender at this hotel, and she feels kind of trapped in her life. She doesn't have a clear idea of what she wants to do for the rest of her life, but she knows it's not that. So I liked the idea that she goes from that into, right, what she refers to as the kingdom of money, this life as a trophy wife, and finds that also to be sort of full of constraints. Oh, I have a special guest. Just one second.
Okay.
Come on out. This is my daughter, Cassia. We all work
Hey,
from
how
home
you
now.
doing? I'm Steven. Nice to meet you.
Hi to Steven. See you soon.
Thanks for joining us.
Oh, you can hang up. All right. So yeah, I liked the idea that even in this sort of magical new world, she found all of these unexpected constraints. The kingdom of money, it's interesting. I grew up in a very working class environment. And at this point, most of the people who I know and encounter did not. Literary fiction, it's a lot of people grew up middle class, upper middle class. And it seems to me that they just have a completely different set of expectations around how they think the world works and what they expect of it. So, and that I don't mean that in any kind of derogatory way. It's just kind of an interesting cultural difference. And when I talk to someone who did grow up with more of a safety net, it does feel in some way like talking to someone from a different country that, it's just kind of a cultural difference that exists.
And also thank you to for the many mentions of Greenwich throughout the book, which is Jonathan's and Vincent's main residence. Later on in the book, after she leaves the kingdom of money, she uses the phrase, luxury is a weakness. I couldn't tell if she was rationalizing her current situation or she was ashamed of her past indulgences, or both.
I don't know that I would want to make a clear determination one way or the other, but that idea of luxury being a weakness, it's just kind of an idea that I found interesting. Years and years ago, when I was in my early 20s and had no money, and whenever I flew home to British Columbia to see my family, I'd be in an economy middle seat. Let me run to Daddy. No? You're very quiet? Okay. I remember overhearing a conversation between a couple of people at a cafe. And they were saying, I want to fly economy to save money because it's so expensive in first class, but it's so uncomfortable. I mean, you want to, but you can't. Like, how could anybody possibly do that? And it's like, that's kind of an illustration of where I was going there, where there are people who've become so accustomed to luxury that they can't really cope with its absence. And that is a kind of weakness, which... like, to be clear, I vastly prefer flying first class, but it's something I noticed.
I've never flown first class, but I could imagine that there's a vast difference. There's a scene early on in the book that takes place on New Year's Eve, 1999. The Y2K bug is mentioned a few times, and I couldn't help but think how quaint that sounds now in light of our current situation. Do you feel the same way?
I do, yeah. But if you remember that time, we thought it might be the end of the world. Like, we were expecting, or we were at least prepared for the possibility of some kind of crazy widespread collapse. Like, I had friends who were holed up in remote cabins with supplies for Y2K. It turned out to be kind of a non-event, but I do remember it quite vividly. And yeah, it does seem quaint in retrospect, but it was so real at the time.
Yeah, right. Another clever surprise in the book is that there are a few instances in this book where you give a winking reference to Station 11, your previous book. The Georgian flu is slyly referenced, and a
Right.
character named Leon Provant, who was featured briefly in Station 11, makes an appearance in the Glass Hotel. I'm curious about how that came about.
What it really was is I just really wanted to reuse a couple of my favorite characters from Station 11. All of my books are completely standalone works, but I do sometimes just really like particular characters and I want to find a way to use them again. So with Station 11, your foot off there. With Station 11, I knew that I wanted to reuse Miranda Carroll and Leon Provant. But of course, the challenge there is the world ends in Station 11. So I didn't want readers of the next book to be, thinking in terms of, I wonder when the Georgia flu will arrive. So
Mm-hmm.
I tried to set up the idea of alternate universes, really in both books. So in Station 11, there's a post-apocalyptic chapter toward the end of the book where Kirsten and August are sitting together, and they're playing this game that they play where they just kind of riff on the possibilities of alternate universes. Like imagine an alternate universe where the Georgia flu never happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I was trying to sort of lay that groundwork. And then with Station 11, I have kind of the reverse. Vincent's walking down the street, kind of thinking to herself about alternate universes and thinking, well, imagine a universe where that terrifying new flu wasn't quite so swiftly contained. So yeah, I just wanted to have a way to use Miranda and Leon again. Just one second. Here, come on.
The idea of swift containment is pretty appealing right now,
Oh
too.
God, yeah.
Um, so there's quite a bit about the book we haven't covered, but I want to make sure I talk about Vincent's half-brother, Paul. When we first meet him, he seems sort of helpless and sympathetic, but we later learn he's sort of sneaky and malicious. And one of the most powerful scenes for me in the book is when Vincent goes to the Brooklyn Academy of Music and discovered how Paul has used her art as his. I'm just wondering if you can talk about that a bit.
Sure, yeah. I see Paul as a really fundamentally tragic character. I wish I could remember who came up with the phrase. Maybe character is destiny. Yeah,
I don't know,
yeah,
sorry.
I don't know. I came across that somewhere years ago. And it's something that I think about in relation to Paul. He's not, I don't know that I'd call him a fundamentally bad guy. He's unhappy, he's kind of messed up. What he has is this terrible sense of entitlement. He's a guy who feels like the world owes him something. And that's a rough fate. That's a difficult way to move through life,
Mhm.
and hard on the people around him. So the relationship that he has with Vincent is that Vincent's mother left their father. No, sorry, Vincent's father left. I'm getting this all mixed up. They have the same father, different mothers.
Correct.
Their father left Paul's mother for Vincent's mother. So Paul's always had this kind of irrational chip on his shoulder about it. And he's always felt like Vincent was unfairly luckier than he's been, which is a real immaturity, expecting the world to be fair in some way. Yeah, so I saw that as kind of sad, even though what he does is awful. I mean, he feels entitled to her art. It sort of feels like just compensation for how much more unhappy and how much more difficult he perceives his own life to have been as opposed to hers.
And I know that there was not a lot of follow-up regarding the specific scene, but I sort of feel that, judging from his character, that despite his success in this particular venture, I'm guessing he still wasn't happy.
Yeah, I think he's one of those characters who will never be happy. He just he doesn't have that equipment psychically.
So your previous novel, Station 11, was not only a commercial success, but a critical success. Did you feel any pressure regarding this when you were conceiving and writing The Glass Hotel? And I don't mean pressure from your publishers, but pressure from yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's about the least sympathetic problem in the entire world, but it was real. Yeah. If you have a book that's successful, there's all of a sudden this kind of invisible audience looking over your shoulder, waiting for the next one. And, to your point, my publishers could not have been nicer about it. Like there was no pressure from them. just this kind of self-generated internal pressure, I guess, that I put on myself to try to write something that people would like as much as they liked Station 11, which is kind of a silly goal because obviously there's no such thing as a book that everybody likes. But yeah, the pressure was real. And I think that's probably partly why it took me so long to write The Glass Hotel. It took about 5 years to write this book versus 2.5 for Station 11. And 2.5 had been about my average up until that point.
So now, how are you feeling now that it's all over? And what do what's next?
Um, I'm I'm so happy with the reception this book is getting. It's just been extraordinary, and yeah, it's amazing. This is such a dark time, just generally. I don't know if you can hear all the ambulance sirens in the background, but yeah,
No.
that's what we hear all day in New York now. And this has just been this really kind of amazing bright spot. You know, it's pretty bad here generally, but there's this wonderful thing happening, and I'm really grateful for that. And yeah, what's next? I just started my next novel. It'll take a while to write, and I've also been working on a TV project. So The Glass Hotel is being adapted for television. In theory, the world's totally shut down. But a nice thing about the world being shut down is you can still write. So I've written the pilot script. It's been accepted by the studio, and I'm going to start working on episode 2.
So, another lone bright spot about the world getting shut down is that you can still read. And I think that your book has really made this a lot easier for a lot of people to deal with. So thank you. Regarding promoting the book, you probably had a bunch of things lined up, and that's all been put aside. So how has it been virtually promoting your book? Has it been weird?
Oh, way less weird than I thought it would be. Yeah, I had a 25 city tour lined up, which, fell apart one piece at a time. And every day I still get emails from Air Canada or Delta saying, your travel plans have changed. It's like, yeah, a tiny bit, right? So I'm canceling flights every day. Yeah, I had a 25 city tour set up. I was honestly kind of dreading doing virtual events, but it's been kind of great, I have to say. I've definitely developed favorite platforms. Zoom and Crowdcast are way better than Instagram Live for sound quality. And it's actually been kind of nice, which is maybe partly a function of these lockdown conditions that we're all living under, where it is a real pleasure to talk to somebody who doesn't live in your house. So maybe it's partly that. It's partly that with the live events, I can see how many people are there. And, I did an event a week or two ago for 400 people. That was sponsored by Politics and Prose, a great bookstore in Washington, D.C. And that was actually kind of moving to me, just thinking of all of these people tuning in to listen and be part of the event. So, yeah, I have to say it's been way less weird than I'd expected, and kind of great a lot of the time.
Could you see all the other people on the other end? Did you just see all 400 of them, or how did that work?
I can't see them, but I just see the numbers ticking up in a little box at the bottom of the screen. Yeah, I could just see the interviewer and sometimes somebody from the bookstore.
I think we probably should wind this up, but I really appreciate you taking the time out to chat with us. And I'm just wondering if maybe we could close by reading a bit from the book.
Sure, I would love to. I need to put you down for a second. 1 second. Yeah, this brave new world of no childcare. So we mentioned that sort of fragmentary first chapter. So why don't I read that? It's about 3 minutes. All right, so this is the first chapter of The Glass Hotel. And if it sounds a bit fragmentary, it's because it is. It's little short sections. Vincent in the Ocean, December 2018. Begin at the end, plummeting down the side of the ship in the storm's wild darkness, breath gone with the shock of falling, my camera flying away through the rain. Sweep me up. Words scrawled on a window when I was 13 years old. I stepped back and let the marker drop from my hand, and still I remember the exuberance of that moment, that feeling in my chest like light glinting on crushed glass. Have I risen to the surface? The cold is annihilating. The cold is all there is. A strange memory, Standing by the shore at Cayette when I was 13 years old, my brand new video camera, cool and strange in my hands, filming the waves in 5-minute intervals. And as I'm filming, I hear my own voice whispering, I want to go home, I want to go home, I want to go home. Although where is home if not there? Where am I? Neither in nor out of the ocean. I can't feel the cold anymore, or actually anything. I am aware of a border, but I can't tell which side I'm on, and it seems I can move between memories, like walking from one room to the next. I am out of time. I want to see my brother. I can hear him talking to me, and my memories of him are agitating. I concentrate very hard, and abruptly I'm standing on a narrow street, in the dark, in the rain, in a foreign city. A man is slumped in a doorway just across from me, and I haven't seen my brother in a decade, but I know that it's him. Paul looks up, and there's time to notice that he looks terrible, gaunt and undone. He sees me, but then the street blinks out. So that's, the very fragmentary first chapter of The Glass Hotel.
That's for tremendous. Again, thank you. Once again, Emily St. John Mandel's new book is called The Glass Hotel. Hop onto the Greenwich Library website to check out the ebook or audiobook edition, or please give our friends at Diane's Books in Greenwich a call and order a copy. I'm sure they would be happy to send you one in the mail. I hope to see you again when things aren't so strange, and congratulations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks.